Hello, welcome to the Temple Israel of New Rochelle Oral History Project. My name is Mitchell Benson, and I welcome Judy Robinson to be interviewed for this program. The date is July 22nd, 2019, and we're both participating in the recording of this archive at Temple Israel. The interviewee, Judy Robinson, has agreed to and signed the interviewer and interviewee release dated today, July 22nd, 2019. With the formalities completed, let's begin the interview. Good afternoon, Judy.
Hello.
Can you state your full name?
Judy Robinson.
Now,
Judith Robinson.
now as we're conducting this interview in English, and you clearly speak fluent Americanized English, I understand that's not the only language you speak.
Right.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, I was born in Peru, so we spoke Spanish. I went to the English school there, so that's how come I did all my schooling in English. And also because of what happens in life, my mother happened to be born in France, and my family was very Francophile, so we also speak French. And some people have an ear for languages, and I know a little bit of German, and we just came back from Israel, and after a while I know what everybody's talking about.
So, you mentioned, Lima, Peru,
Right.
but you and your husband, Bernard, have lived in New Rochelle for many years.
Right.
But your place of birth was where?
Lima.
And were your parents also born in Lima?
No. My father was from Lithuania, and he left just before in 1936 because his next step in his education was just to go to the Russian military service, and he was not interested in that. So he had an uncle that had already gone to Peru, so he left to go join him. And on my mother's side, they were from Bulgaria, Spanish Jews, and they were on their way to Peru because my grandfather saw the unrest in Europe, and that was late 20s, and my grandmother became pregnant with my mother. So in those days, you took the boat from La Rochelle in France. They had to stay there because she couldn't travel pregnant, so they only stayed 8 years. And my grandfather started a family business which was making candy and like Turkish candy, lokum, in France. And then they really saw that things were not good and then went to Peru because they also had relatives that had gone to Peru before.
So your mother's family, well, actually your father moved to Peru then in 1936?
36.
And you say Lithuania, but is there a particular spot in Lithuania, and was that location always Lithuania?
No, the family story is that my grandmother had 3 children born on the same bed in 3 different countries. Once it was Poland, once it was Russia, and once it was Lithuania.
So it's one of those places that
Right.
because the border shifted,
Right,
they all had 3
It
different
was
nations of birth, though the same house.
right.
It's
It was
interesting.
a little river from one side, for the border from Poland.
Was your what was your father's last name,
Prijaskis,
and what was his first name?
Ari.
Okay, so he had like a Hebrew name or a biblical
Right.
name, and what type of name was Aprijaskis? Do you think that
It was sort of an adopted Jewish name, but with Lithuanian add-ons. Kis could be Greek if it's a Latin sounding name, But if it's a Germano kind of name, it becomes Lithuanian.
Okay, because that's an unusual one.
Right.
Um, do you know anything about the family history going back in Lithuania? Other than, I know you told us the story of your grandmother having 3 kids, 3 different nations, but do you know the history that goes beyond that generation?
I think what happened, they had come from another city, and in the olden days, what happened is that the families had a lot of children, so they couldn't all go into the family business or store, so they had to go find new villages to go live in. Before that, I really don't know. But so they went to this little town, Kivartai, which happened to be one railroad stop away from where Rabbi Wool's family came.
Oh, really? Oh. So your father, when he went directly from Lithuania to
Peru.
What caused him to seek that destination?
He had an uncle there already.
Mm-hmm.
And as usual, you couldn't get into America. The borders were always closed, especially for Jewish people.
Was he the only person from his immediate family to make the journey?
Yes.
Did the rest then remain in Lithuania?
They did. He had a brother and a sister. The brother and parents were killed immediately by the local people. They didn't even need the Nazis to come in when the Nazis ordered every Jewish person to be killed. And it was the children of not my grandparents' generation, but their children who committed all the atrocities. And his sister happened to be in the hospital at the time with tuberculosis, and her young friends had heard about it, and they picked her up. Everybody that was in the hospital, they were in a murder immediately. So they took all their friends. How they did it, I don't know. And they made it to Uzbekistan. And they stayed there throughout the war. And then little by little came back to Lithuania. And she became a professor of English, never having been to an English-speaking country. And she was on national television. She was really famous.
Wow. So your father was able to learn about his family's fate through his sister who survived.
Right.
Because the people that moved her out of the hospital, were they from the Jewish community or non-Jewish community?
Yeah, they only hung out together, the Jewish kids. And then she moved to Israel with her 2 daughters. And one daughter actually moved to Israel before, and then she and the second daughter moved to Israel.
And your father then, so he had an uncle and not much else by way of family in Lima.
Right.
And then obviously his background was not a Spanish-speaking background.
No.
Do you know about how old he was when he moved?
20.
And did he? Do you know what he did for a living or school-wise once he arrived in Lima?
He was a student. He had studied all his life, and he arrived in Lima, and his uncle was in some kind of textiles, and that's what he did. He went in to work with the uncle.
Now your mother's family left the country they were in, which was what?
Bulgaria.
They left in 1929, or the 20s.
Before.
Earlier. But they didn't go directly to Peru. They had a stop in France.
Right.
Where they were for a number of years.
Right.
And then the pressure of the war.
The unrest in Europe.
Do you know what year it was that they escaped from France?
I'm thinking 32.
Okay. And then they went to Peru at that time?
Right.
So your mother's family, did she make it with her parents, her whole family?
Yes.
Okay, and she had siblings as well?
Right.
So your mother's side had a bigger family, bigger presence in Peru.
Right. And a wonderful story is that my mother had a brother, he's no longer, and he was left in France because he was finishing high school. And they sent him to a place called Lycée Michelet in Paris. And 50 years to the day, our son Lloyd went with the French exchange from Rochelle High School to Lycée Michelet. Is that an unreal coincidence?
Just the place, there was no connection then with...
None. Oh. It's just how it happens.
Wow. Your mother's family name was what?
Alcabez.
Interesting thing about that, and you said that seemed like a Spanish pronunciation. It sounds like a Spanish name. Your family was from Bulgaria. You said Spanish Jews. Did they consider themselves Sephardic Jews?
Right.
And you mentioned to me the other day, which I think is fascinating, the Jews who settled in Bulgaria, the Sephardic Jews, were Sephardic Hebrew for Spanish in their true sense.
Right.
What language did they speak in Bulgaria?
Ladino. Well, they spoke Bulgarian, but they also a lot of French. They were very interested in being in the Balkan countries, and Ladino.
And just for those who aren't familiar with Ladino, if you could explain that.
Well, Ladino is the Spanish of the 14th, 15th century that never evolved as opposed to, modern Spanish. And, because we're from Peru, we just about speak Ladino. You understand everything they say and they understand you.
Oh, because interestingly, so your family's language, Spanish language, comes back from centuries in the past.
Right.
And then Peru's Spanish would be the Spanish from settlers from Spain centuries ago.
Well, but it's a Spanish that never evolved.
Right.
And, it's not a modern Spanish.
Right.
So, but it's very close.
Right.
I would imagine it's the same thing as Yiddish and German.
Okay.
It's different accents, different words for certain things, but it's the same.
How did your parents then meet up in Lima?
It was a small Jewish community, and there were not too many eligible bachelors or bachelorettes. And my grandmother taught Hebrew, and my father volunteered with her, to teach Hebrew to the younger kids. And I guess they took a look at each other.
All right. So your father did bring some knowledge of Hebrew from Europe.
Oh yes, they were very well educated in Lithuania.
Were they religious?
They weren't. They were not Orthodox, extreme Orthodox, but everybody was religious. Everybody was, heavy conservative in today's standards.
In those days, like when you were a child, what would you estimate the overall population of Lima and then the Jewish population of Lima?
Well, there were a few million people, and Jewish people were like 500 families.
So tiny fraction.
Tiny.
Although, and the 500 families, did they all belong to one synagogue?
No. There were the more Orthodox, more conservative, Reformed. The German Jews were more Reformed, but within Orthodox parameters. And there were the people that were from Eastern Europe, and we belonged to the synagogue that was mainly of the Spanish Jews.
So your basically the synagogue you joined then would have been the one more associated with your mother's
Right.
upbringing than your
Right.
father's upbringing.
Right. But my father liked it better because they knew how to pray better. They spoke a better Hebrew. They were more educated.
Do you recall attending that synagogue, that congregation?
Yes, of course. And we had to go sit upstairs, and all the ladies only gossiped and looked down below at the gorgeous young men.
So you say we, that meaning that that was Orthodox enough. I'm not saying real Orthodox, but the men and women sat separately.
Right.
And you know, here in the United States, services are conducted in English with some Hebrew. What was the language spoken in the synagogue?
Only Hebrew.
Only Hebrew.
Only.
It's interesting, and in those days, the young boys attended Hebrew school.
Well, it wasn't like Hebrew school. First of all, the Jewish kids went to the Jewish school for their education, so everything was in Hebrew. Not everything, but they were taught Hebrew right away. And but I didn't go to that school. My parents knew that America was going to be the best country in the world, so they wanted us to really learn English. So it turned out okay.
Were some of your classmates, you know, Americans who happened to be living in
Yeah,
Lima?
with the servicemen, or, you know, people in the, not ambassadors, but, you know, diplomatic corps, or people that came to work with Peruvian companies, you know, Americans that came to work.
Were there any Jewish kids at that school besides yourself?
Yeah, a few of us.
And were your friendships primarily from school, from your neighborhood, from your synagogue, some other source? Or?
School.
Okay.
100 years later, we're still totally in touch. Every day there's we're on a group WhatsApp, and it's very nice.
That's wonderful. So you were affiliated with the synagogue. Your father was knowledgeable of Hebrew. Your mother's family was affiliated with Sephardic, but was your family observant in the home? Well, did you keep kosher? Did you observe the Sabbath? Were your parents
Not
particularly
really.
religious? What would you say?
Without knowing, I think my grandmother's house kept kosher, but we didn't pay attention to anything like that. And my house, yes, you know, to a certain degree, it was kosher, but it really wasn't just kosher because certain products didn't come into the house.
There's a kosher butcher in Lima?
Very rarely.
Okay.
Things were scarce. You know, once in a while, Manischewitz sent
Okay.
a truckload.
What was the environment like for Jewish people in terms of security or non-security in Peru at that time?
Well, when I was a kid, you know, it was not a problem. Security was a problem for everybody. That's how, you know, the country operates.
I know that Peru has had, even in recent years, some threats to their government stability. I know there was revolutionary groups at times.
Right.
Were they in operation when you were growing up? The communists or the leftist militias?
That was that's only like 25 years ago.
Okay.
I was already here.
Okay.
It was pretty stable growing up. Everybody was hardworking. It was nice. It was a nice life.
Your family, you know, almost. You said there was some observance, some like almost being kept kosher, but just by habit, not
Right.
really. How would you describe your mother and father in terms of their spirituality, or how, you know, what their traditional beliefs were or not?
Well, my father was a lot more being traditional, observant. But my mother was an artist, so it wasn't too interesting to her. But late in life, they went to synagogue every single Friday. They, they found this spirituality together.
For your mother's generation, for a woman to be an artist, was she college educated, or
Yes.
where did she go to school?
In Peru, the Art Institute of Peru, which was, very, very famous at the time. It still is.
What was her medium?
Oils and then acrylic.
And
when acrylic was invented, it was the best thing that happened to her.
Do you remember your mother's art?
Yes, we have it.
You have pieces in your home?
Oh, a lot. And she has become very famous, and she's in the Peruvian Encyclopedia, actually, about famous painters. And also, she is in pretty famous collections of in South America now, with very upscale people.
What is her name? And I'm going to ask you to spell it, just because I like a record. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're best.
Her name is Regina Aprijaskis, Aprijaskis.
So she was an artist then, and
she was born knowing. It's such a gift. People go to school, but for her, she was born like knowing how to, and the eye, and then of course we traveled a lot and went to all the museums we could possibly go.
Did you develop an eye or appreciation for art?
A very big appreciation, but I can't draw a straight line.
The ability, that talent, did it pass on to anybody in your family?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're hoping.
Okay. So your mother, being an artist at that time, was almost consciously not religious in those days, and then had a different appreciation of at least synagogue attendance later.
But we always went high holy days, always, not dinners at my grandmother's, never not went,
And what did your father do for?
My father continued with his uncle in textiles.
Okay.
And then he went on off on his own, and he did very well.
Well, very good. So he the business that he developed was a successful business.
Right.
And did you have siblings?
2 brothers, and one lives in California, and one lives in New Jersey.
Oh, so all 3 of you ended up moving to the United States.
Yes, and my mother always said we should never have sent the kids to college in the United States because they don't come back.
Was that your situation from high school in Peru to attending college in the United States?
Sort of, until I met a nice Jewish boy.
Whose idea was it that you would be attending university
Did I come here?
Yes.
I think it was just the thing to do. That's how it was.
When you came, did you come by yourself?
Yes.
And
we were very grown up.
I see. So you go ahead. You went through the process of applying to school from Peru, or you moved to the States first?
No, I applied from Peru. I remember I had to take a English aptitude test at the embassy, and it was like a no-brainer. It was just a formality. It was so funny.
It's a good gift to have. And then, so did you go to college in New York?
Right.
So explain where you were at school and where you were living.
I was living with a roommate that the people that introduced us also introduced me to this roommate. And I went to a place called Catherine Gibbs, which was an executive secretary school. And I helped Bernie in the business, thanks to my skills, a little bit.
Well, when you say Bernie, you're talking and introduce us, you're referring to your husband, Bernard Robinson.
Right.
So how long after you arrived in New York and started school would you say you met Bernie?
10 days.
Wow.
First blind date.
Wow. So, but the people you said that introduced you also introduced you to your roommate.
Right.
Did you have some connection to them before you came to the U.S.?
Yes, we knew them because they all had houses on Lake Mahopac.
Okay.
So, one thing led to another. This one knew that one.
And then they
Right.
introduced you to a roommate. This is important people in your life.
Geography.
Right. And then to
Right.
Bernie. So what was your impression of Bernie when you met him?
Oh, tall and handsome.
All right. You say tall, and it was interesting that, I spoke to him just before you. He was sitting in the same chair. I had to adjust the height of the camera a little bit. He is over 6 feet tall.
Right.
Right. Well, it's nice to hear that. And he was an interesting fellow when you to speak to.
Yes, right away we hit it off.
Do you remember anything about the first date?
Well, he told you before, we met through the people that, introduced us. Funny thing, were living in Rochelle, and they had a babysitter problem. So they had to get home fast. So we met at Patricia Murphy's on Central Avenue, and they hurried home because of the babysitter, and we went downtown and had drinks at some place, but we had to stay in the car until Cassius Clay won the championship.
Oh wait, so the couple that it was gonna be a double date
Right.
with this couple that lived in New Rochelle,
Right.
and you started out in Central Avenue in Yonkers, or
Right.
near there.
That in those olden days, there were very few restaurants in Westchester,
Okay.
and that was like the closest thing to a restaurant. And it was a funny kind of restaurant.
Now you and Bernard each lived in the city,
Right.
but because that family lived in Westchester,
Right,
you were up
right,
here.
Right.
So it's interesting. Once that couple had to break off for childcare,
Right.
you continued the date
Right.
without escort or chaperone,
Right.
unchaperoned.
Right. Well, we were kind of two adults already.
And you went down to, do you remember where you went into the city?
Yes, we went to a place called Lantern D. It was right off Fifth Avenue. It was when the discos first started. It wasn't a loud disco. It was for people our age.
You said you stayed in the car. Does that mean that Bernie had a car?
He had a car,
Oh.
and we had to listen to the radio to this fight.
Cassius Clay fighting Sonny Liston.
Right,
Oh, so it's interesting. He's got this young lady he likes,
right.
being polite, but can I just hear the end of the fight
Right.
first?
Important things first.
That's
A typical male.
an
Right?
introduction to American men. That's not atypical.
I should have known.
Right. So then you had saw him after that.
Right, right away. He called for a second date and a third date, and
Did you feel that you were
oh my God,
destined?
yes.
That's nice. Huh. So you had a roommate, and then how long would you say after you met Bernie that you got married?
10 months.
Okay, and where
We
was
met in February, and we got married in November.
where was the wedding?
It was where the General Motors building is now. It was called the Savoy Plaza, across the street from the Plaza Hotel.
Very nice. Was it did the rabbi perform the?
We got married at Temple Emmanuel.
Okay. And then the reception was at the.
Yeah.
So, you came to the United States. 10 months later, did you have family flying up for a wedding from Peru?
Yeah.
And how did they receive this whole change, this news and this change?
I guess they were happy. I didn't ask them.
All right. And where did the two of you settle down after that?
Well, I moved into Bernie's apartment on 67th Street, and we stayed there, I think, a year or two, and then moved to 87th and Madison. And then we had too many kids and one extra one on the way, and that's when we moved to Rochelle.
That's a common path even today. That
Right.
People have the. What type of apartment did you have on the Upper East Side?
Oh, it was gorgeous.
Oh.
And today we couldn't afford it.
How many bedrooms were there?
It was 2 bedrooms, but it had like a sitting room on the side of one bedroom. It was a beautiful apartment.
Now you had 2 children and one on the way.
Right.
So you have 3 children.
Or 3 sons.
Can you just say their names?
Lloyd, Brian, and Richard.
Okay. And so Lloyd and Brian were the 2.
Right.
How did you pick New Rochelle? Was that partly because of your friends that you knew that lived here?
No, not really. We looked and looked and looked. It was a lot of work, house hunting. And at that point, the budget was limited. And his brothers were in Scarsdale, and we kept looking in Scarsdale, and we already needed a bigger house than normal people did that were just married. And we just bumped into our house, and we just knew that was it. And then Bernie consulted with his brothers, who said, of course, buy the house. And thank goodness the kids have done very well, thanks to Rochelle.
How many years did you stay in that house?
We're still in that house.
So that's been, wow.
54 years.
Sounds like a good fit. And so that's all your sons
Right.
know that as their home. They can
That's
still
right.
come home.
That's right.
When they come to visit or stay there, right? Do they still have bedrooms that they?
Of course. And the grandchildren, when they come, where do you want to sleep? In my dad's room.
Oh, interesting.
So that's really lovely.
That, I guess it's nice. It's also easy, but to have that sense of home is wonderful. You at some point became affiliated with Temple Israel.
Right.
Do you have a recollection of that choice or how that happened?
We used to go to the Midwestchester Y. It's the JCC now, at the end of Wilmot. And they had like mini services for the high holidays and all that. And then I remember somebody saying, it's time you could belong to a synagogue, because Lloyd has to start getting Hebrew, his bar mitzvah education. And it sort of registered. I remember this woman, I couldn't tell you her name, but and then we went to Bethel, and then we came here, and we decided this is where we belong. And we joined, really not knowing too many people. And little by little, we got involved and, got the kids involved. And it was tough to carpool, I remember. Nobody lived at our end. Everybody sort of lived further north. But, we worked it out. And then I remember Helene Handelman one day, a few years later, calling us if we wanted to go to the dinner dance with them. And we said, oh, of course, thank you. And then we got even more involved.
Is that what today they would call the gala?
Right.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting because it's a kind of a pattern, or not unusual that people affiliate with the temple. They may not know other adults, but their kids are involved.
Right.
Was Miss Handelman, was she? Did she have kids in the?
Right. And then we ended up carpooling. Her daughter Nina was one of my kids' ages.
Okay. And then, do you remember other people that you became friendly with from those days, the earlier days?
They're all gone.
Oh, but you remember?
But our neighbors were older, but they were here and always included us over. We're like the young couple.
Okay.
Next door, and that was the Gaines, and everybody was lovely. And then, of course, when Rabbi Wool came in, and he was just the most wonderful person, always, including us, always calling you for your birthday. I mean, he did that to everybody. It wasn't just us. Always. And when he married Ivy, it was like the most beautiful couple. It was just great.
You have warm memories then of Rabbi Wool
Oh,
in particular.
Very, very. And then we used to see him in Florida. He used to have, the temple reunion in Florida that we always went to, once he retired.
You described your mom as having the almost intellectual, non-religious sensibility. She changed to, at least, I don't know what her spiritual sense was, but she began to attend synagogue more often.
Yes.
How about you in terms of your sense of spirituality, level of observance, and how that changed from the time you moved to New Rochelle, joined the temple, and then your experience with Rabbi Wool? Can you describe that at all?
Well, he sort of pointed out what was required of a Jewish person, and it registered.
In what way would you say? That he pointed out?
To
Or?
pay attention that, we're not really living in a laic environment. You're part of Judaism, part of being Jewish.
And his influence obviously had an impact on you.
Very, very big.
And you remember his sermons, or?
Oh, yes.
And what are your memories or thoughts of that?
It was a little, about Judaism, a little about politics. I mean, he was just, just always on track, always said the right things, always, it was great.
You, he had that influence over you then and made you
Right.
feel closer to this?
Right,
Do
totally.
Could you comment at all? And I don't want to put you on the spot about your own spirituality or what impact that's had, or any.
Well, I think that, it sort of had it on the children. And, when they were bar mitzvah, I insisted after that they come to confirmation and Hebrew high school. And as a matter of fact, I asked Lloyd the other day, are you okay that I insisted that you continue the education? He said, oh, yes. So that was nice.
At the time, did any of your kids give you resistance to?
Oh, my goodness. It's part of growing up Jewish. You have to resist.
But Lloyd obviously went on in adulthood to become the president of the
Right.
congregation for some
Right.
years.
It did make us quite proud.
It should be. He told a story. I remember, he participated in comedy night, first comedy night, and he said that when he was elected president, he got a handwritten note from Rabbi Wool, which consisted of one word, which was "you." So Lloyd probably showed a little more, youthful rebellion at that age.
Well, funny story is that he used to sneak out of religious classes, and they would find him over by the hutch, and they sent us a letter, we found your son over by the hutch, whatever. And then when he became president, I guess I got a call, do you remember anything? I said, yeah, I remember that letter. Don't you know they had a copy here?
Huh. of the one where they informed the parent?
And they put it in the program that night.
Very funny. So
there's hope.
Lloyd has 2 sons.
Right.
And their names are
Ari and Ben.
And then your Ari's named after
my father.
Right. And is Ben have a particular?
No.
Ben's Hebrew name too, or Jewish name?
Right.
Now your second son was
Brian.
Brian. Does he have kids?
He has 3 kids with his first wife. And his first wife was not Jewish, but Rabbi Wall converted her.
Okay.
She wanted the conversion. And the 3 kids have been bar mitzvah. They're totally Jewish.
What are their names?
They're Jack, Teddy, and Lucy.
How old are they?
They're 17, 15, and 13.
Because I know Ari and Ben are like 14 and 12
Right,
in that area.
right.
And where do they live?
Brooklyn.
Okay. So did you get to see them with some
a
frequency?
lot, yeah.
Right. And then your third son,
Richard,
is living
in Israel.
Who are his, what's his family?
His family, the lovely wife, Hannah, who used to be Orthodox, but she left that kind of fold. So she knows everything, but isn't observant at all. And they have 2 boys, 2.5 children, and they are Agavi and Aloni. And they love my son loves being in Israel. I think they were living in Northern California, and I think it was like you had to be defensive of Judaism in Northern California, and nobody, so they picked up and left. And I think for them it's just wonderful.
What do you mean by defensive, would you say? Just
to defend Judaism, that people are pro-BDS, and everybody, has some kind of Jewish blood, but, they don't want to know that they have Jewish blood, that kind of thing.
I understand. So to preserve it and their
Right.
Their kids'
Right.
sense of identity, they end
Right.
up moving to Israel.
And that's 2 years ago, and the kids now are fluent in Hebrew. It's just so, they're the ones that translate for us. It's so cute.
But you have to be proud of that, I'm
Oh,
sure.
very, very.
How often do you get to see them?
Well, last year we saw them more because they came to the day camp here with Rabbi Jesse
Oh,
for a few weeks, and that
Wow.
was, oh my God, it was wonderful. So this year we just came back, we saw them, and hopefully next year they'll come again, spend a few weeks at the camp.
of course. That's I guess that is a good testament to the Jewish education that you insisted that they all stick with.
I know. But I think Rabbi Wall gave me the strength too. It's easier to just give in, give up.
So, I want to ask you a couple questions about you, because I know, this isn't about me, but I've been aware of you, and, like my wife is a tennis player, and she's remarked on some of your activities. What what you play tennis and you have other activities, but can you describe a little bit of that?
I play tennis and golf.
Right. So yeah, she's not a golfer, but she told me that you are a skilled tennis player. How did that? Was that from high school or local or those sports?
When we were kids, everybody took all the lessons, throughout the years, and then one day I just got better.
Okay. And so do you play just recreationally, or have you played competitively?
Competitively.
And how would you describe that? Like in what type of? Have you ever played in some association or league play?
Yes. Leagues and things, and I also 20 years ago played in the Maccabiah Games in Israel and came home with a silver medal.
Oh, congratulations. And so you represented
US.
United States. All right.
In it's by age group, and it's called the Masters, and it's increments of 5 years, and then you give a donation, and that defrays the cost of the young kids.
Okay.
Which is, give them an education and, entry into Israel.
Was that an individual award or a team award? This
Doubles.
Okay, doubles. Who's your teammate?
Oh, that's so funny that you asked, because the whole team from U.S. met at Kennedy, and we all got on the same plane. And a friend of mine, she was older than me, so we were not in the same age group, sat next to this one lady, and so, we were very busy talking to everybody on the plane, and we got introduced, and we sort of met on the tennis court the day after, I guess, or first we toured Jerusalem, and we said we'd be partners, and we've been friends ever since.
Where's she from?
San Diego.
Oh, wow.
Ricky Block.
Oh.
And the funniest thing is that we kind of look alike, some short little blonde bob, and the husbands couldn't tell us apart from the back.
On the court. Well, they're watching, right. Well, you both did pretty well.
Yeah, no complaints.
What would you say is a stronger sport for you, tennis or golf?
Tennis.
Okay.
Golf is tough.
It's tough? You enjoy playing, though?
I do.
How often do you think you get out there?
As much as I can. If I'm not playing tennis, I'm playing golf.
Because I know you've been a member of Bonnie Breyer. And because Lloyd's told me that he's been a member of that for
since just
decades.
about he was born, right?
Right. He was a swimmer.
Right.
Did he play water polo too, or
yes, he did, and for school too, for college.
Right. And do your other sons have sports they played competitively?
Also swimmers. It just happened that we liked the water, and we made sure the kids learned how to swim, and then one thing led to the other, and the swim coach said, I have a team, and we said okay, and they swam for teams.
And so that's another, for all three to participate is great. It's also the parents having to shuttle them around, I guess.
Well, that was my job.
Yeah, that becomes a full-time activity. But all successful. Judy, is there anything else that you want to share for this archive?
I don't know what else you're interested in.
Well, I appreciate everything that you've shared. If there's anything else you think, it's up to you. But
not right now. I can't think.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on all the successes. But I really enjoyed this.
And thank you to you for being such a good person.
Thank you, Judy. Very good. So this completes the interview.